for those people who are just out of college that it's okay to not know. Instead of trying to have a clear path and destination to where you want to be as a mid to late career, think about what you value.
David, weekly, thank you so much for being on my show. It's been 7 years since we last seen each other, but I'm so excited to reclaim all of that inspiration that I had back then. Thank you for joining me.
Pleased to be here. Thank you.
I can't even imagine how busy your schedule is given everything that you do. And first, I want to start by thanking you for coming 7 years ago to one of the hackathons that I organized back in Redwood City, Hacking Generation Y. You gave such a wonderful keynote that I keep visiting, and people have been talking about it ever since then. So really, thank you for talking. And it was about doing. It was about exploring and having passion and having curiosity. And I'm excited to let that shine through here. I'm going to do a really brief intro about you, even though it's not going to do justice. But just bear with me because I have to get the context of who you are. Founded PB Works, then managing founder of Mexican.vc, and I believe you returned 11x on the Cash on Cash, the most profitable Mexican VC in history, I believe. Entrepreneur in residence, Trinity Ventures, founded Gaston Labs, product manager at Facebook after the acquisition of another startup of yours, Ohana, head of product of various things at Google, and most recently, the founder and CEO of Medcorder, which I want to spend a chunk of time talking about because I'm just so excited about your mission. Hacker Dojo, which I didn't even mention. Way too much to talk about. David, who are you? How do you get to do so many things? What is this?
So I'm a nerd who loves people. And I think a lot of what I build just comes out of that. I like to build things. I like to learn new technical systems. I'm a product guy, so I like building solutions to problems and conspiring with other people to go and build those things. And then finally, I like bringing people together. I like connecting people. I get a lot of personal satisfaction out of doing that. And so if you look at the mishmash of stuff that I've done, it probably doesn't seem like it is constructed in a coherent narrative arc, right? And that's because it wasn't, candidly. I think a lot of people starting their careers try to ask the question, like, where do I want to be in 5, 10, 20 years? Like, what is my career going to look like? And it's a tremendously intimidating question, right? Because you look at people who are very, very successful, and I think a lot of people conclude these people must have, just upon graduating college, sat down, thought really hard, and come up with this beautiful story arc of where their life was going to go and how they were going to get there. And oh my gosh, I don't have that written down, or I do, and it's not credible, right? And what am I going to do? I must be a failure because that is the path to success, having this clear multi-decade narrative arc of what your career is going to be. And if you actually get to know a number of very famous and successful people, generally it doesn't work like that, right? That they're likely hardworking, they're likely intelligent, they're likely charismatic or have figured out how to be. That's actually something you can learn to be. And then a number of lucky opportunities came about, and they were able to take advantage of those because they were clever and hardworking and well connected and liked people, right, and could motivate people to go and work on missions, right. And so life often is much more random than we want to give it an account for. So I would say for those people who are just out of college that it's okay to not know. Instead of trying to have a clear path and destination to where you want to be as a mid to late career, think about what you value, right? If you enjoy learning, great. You should make sure that any job that you take, you're going to be learning something. If you enjoy having broad impact and looking at numbers and metrics, great. You don't need to be embarrassed about that. Go run with that. If you enjoy building something brand new, then great. You don't need to be embarrassed about that. One other thing that often comes up in people's career trajectories is that they find themselves embarrassed about things that are off that narrative arc. Maybe you really like being a scuba diver, or you like horses, or you like spending time learning how to go and do ballroom dancing, right? And these things don't feel like they're working toward a successful career endpoint, right? They're outside of this narrative arc. What do I do? And what's funny is oftentimes these things that make you weird, your unique, particular collection of interests and experiences that nobody else has, ends up making you valuable, right? So what we want increasingly is people who are non-fungible, who can't just be swapped out like cogs of a wheel, but whose weird experiences give them unique insights and ways of tackling the problems in front of them that only they could have had, because only they are coming at the problem with those set of weird backgrounds and experiences. So I think, going back to my own trajectory and arc, a lot of it was like that. It was trying to optimize for learning, trying to optimize for impact, trying to not be in a rut or get bored or not developing myself further, always hungry to see what problems can I solve that need to be solved out there in the world. And how can I do that in an enjoyable way, right? And so I've ended up across a lot of different things.
When you optimize, how do you optimize for learning in a world that is such a, it's one, convoluted race towards the top, towards the greatest funding, towards the greatest start, the greatest success. I'm walking the streets of Palo Alto. I'm studying with incredible people. I've served in the Israeli military with some incredible people, and it doesn't feel that always optimized for learning is something that one can afford, right? Because we have to move so quickly. How do you optimize for learning?
How can you possibly succeed if you're not continuously learning, right? Is that the endpoint is not defined. The pie is not fixed. This is not a race where the rules are prescribed and it's clear how to succeed. It's obvious how to build $1 billion company, and you just need to sit down and do the work. Right? Real life isn't like that. The new $1 billion opportunities, by definition, haven't been sussed out, haven't been fleshed out. They're going to require thinking about things in a new way and doing things in a new way. You want to be cognizant of approaches and methodologies that are generally shown to be successful or not successful. You want to learn from your own failures as well as the failures of those around you in terms of what structurally works and not. I'm not saying ignore everything, but I am saying that process of continually learning is a critical one for modern employment. Like, so you take a look at technical product management, right? So anyone who's a PM at Google and pretty much anyone who's a PM at Facebook, and they need to not only have their fingers on the pulse of what are real unsolved problems that are out there in the real world, but then on the other hand, they're trying to match those to what is the state of the art in technology. Right? Yes. What can you grab off the shelf, and what can I not yet grab off the shelf, but I have enough technical depth to know is possible and attainable and is not just magic sprinkle fairy dust, right? And you've got enough credibility to go and map that out to say, I'm going to take these 4 pieces, 3 of which have been known and well-defined for decades, 2 of which only became possible in the last couple months, and then there's this one extra part over here that doesn't yet exist, but I'm confident that with this team of engineers, I can be able to invent on it. And here's the reason why I think it's tractable and de-riskable from a technical perspective. I'm going to put these things together, and I'm going to solve this big problem over here that is otherwise unsolved, right? And I'm going to be the first person to go and have this new way of looking at the problem, this new solution for this problem. And if you were not keeping up on not only what was commercially viable because it was out there, but also as academia advances in understanding what soon will be possible and what commercial impacts that is going to have, if you're not looking into the crystal ball there, you're going to miss out on opportunities. Things that were impossible 5 years ago you'll miss as possible solutions because they're possible now and weren't then, and so you won't think to build the product in that way, leveraging those technologies, right? So you'll miss out. So there's a lot of different ways in which in almost any part of the stack, whether you're a designer or a marketer or an engineer or a product manager or a CEO, almost any role in the company you can think of, even if you're doing QA testing, the state of the art is continuing to evolve pretty quickly. And what that does is it gives superpowers to the people who are able to keep up with it. You can see in this era, small teams have ridiculously sized impact, far more than they've been able to at pretty much any other point in human history. A team of a dozen or so people can build a product that 1 billion people use, right? That's never been
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. And so you think about, what do those couple dozen people need to know? They all need to know how to operate at scale. They need to be able to harness the tools, the methodologies, the frameworks that are out there to operate at scale and to be effective, right? And then to keep up with that. Now, I want to nuance that a little bit with, there's so much that's new always coming out, that trying to be completely on top of absolutely every new development in every field is just not possible for any human being, particularly if you're also, say, trying to build a company at the same time, right? So you'll have to acknowledge that even when you're trying to optimize for learning and keep up on things, you're going to miss a lot. That's okay. No need to beat yourself up. There really are only 24 hours in the day for absolutely everybody. And B, you can also figure out how to leverage your networks to help you proxy for other areas. So if you're focused in some area over here, then as long as you know who to talk to about some of these other areas, so they can sort of keep their ear to the ground for you, then you can have sort of disproportionate impact there, because I don't need to keep up on the state of the art in, say, biotech. That's way outside of stuff I know a lot about, and it's okay for me to not know a lot about that. But I can have interesting conversations with friends of mine who are deep in that, and so I can go and ping them when I have questions there. So you don't have to do it all yourself either.
I think that's just fascinating, David. If I look at your trajectory and the different things that you've done, the incredible things you've done, it's a really remarkable balance between continuing your own journey as an entrepreneur, as an investor, as a thinker, but also giving back to the community. So many of your projects are involving the community, helping others get started, helping others pursue their passions. What is that about? Where does all this motivation and passion for the community building come along with your trajectory of being a great engineer, great entrepreneur?
I think the short answer is because it's fun. It's fun to throw parties. It's fun to introduce people to each other that end up hitting it off and investing in each other, working together to found a company. It's fun to meet with founders who are filled with passion for going and bringing new products into the world and conspiring with them around ways to help their dreams come true. It's an enjoyable thing to do. So even just from a purely selfish perspective, I help the community because I enjoy doing that. I think some of it also is a critical cultural component of Silicon Valley. I think Silicon Valley is not a perfect place. There's a lot of things to hate about it. And there's certainly been lots of discourse around people leaving San Francisco in particular, which is one part of the Bay Area, that I think is valid and pointed. But I think there are some aspects of Silicon Valley culture that are really positive and are also stealable, right? So you can incorporate these aspects into other cultures and other geographies as well. And I think one of the ones that I love is an overall pay it forward mentality. I think most other business ecosystems operate on a very mercenary kind of a basis. So you only take a meeting with somebody if it's clear what they're going to be able to do for you and what you're going to be able to do for them, right? So there's sort of a tit for tat. It's a matching of peers. And it means that it can be very difficult to meet with people who are powerful, people who are wealthy, right? And frankly, it's a little bit more of a fixed pie mentality. Right. So the rich help the rich, the folks who are early try and help folks who are early, but it's always in exchange for something. And that sort of market making where you're trying to match up very evenly two people who can get the equal amount of value for each other. Just the math says there's going to be fewer of those pairings. Right. But if you come at an ecosystem with a pay it forward mentality, there's an enormous explosion in the number of positive connections that can happen. And what capitalism will tell you is that any time there's an exchange, value is created, right? And so by encouraging there to be more of those exchanges, by not looking at the mercenary equal value exchange tit for tat, you end up growing the value of the ecosystem much more dramatically. And we actually, you mentioned you're in Tel Aviv right now. We actually saw this happen in the Israeli startup ecosystem, starting with the ICQ acquisition, because after ICQ, the founders turned around and not only invested their capital, but also their know-how in helping build up the Israeli startup ecosystem. And that really, I would say, just as an outside observer, is where I really saw things start to explode. And so the fact that Israel could apply this Silicon Valley style mentality of reinvest your time and your money in the ecosystem, we really saw things blow up. So out here in Silicon Valley, you take a look at the most experienced venture capital firms that are providing the most disproportionate return. What's true of the VCs there? Generally, they're disproportionately former operators themselves, right? Because they love helping entrepreneurs. They can give actionable advice and guidance on what to do at difficult parts in the startup's journey. And they've been there before, which gives them credibility with founders for highly competitive deals, right? You look at the investment ecosystem in most other parts of the planet, the people making the decisions about whether or not to back an early stage company have never done it themselves. And they actually look down on it, right? You know, when they themselves in a number of different ecosystems inherited that money from their father's corruption, right? And so like they're very big on themselves and they're very down on the lowly entrepreneurs who have to, come crawling on their knees like, please give me your money, esteemed investor, right? And
Right.
really none of that kind of mentality or structure it's not present to nearly the same extent, I would say, here in Silicon Valley, where it's sort of expected that you're going to try your best to go and build something. If it's successful, you're going to pay it back, whether that's because you're going to be a VC and help other companies succeed, or you're going to advise and mentor others, or maybe you're just going to tool in your garage and build awesome open source that everyone can use. But whatever it is that you're going to go and pay it back into the ecosystem. And a lot of the billionaires that are here, the billionaires that are here became billionaires disproportionately because other people went in and helped them with, again, no expectation around return, right? These were people who helped just because it was fun to help people who were starting things, who were founding things. And great things come out of that. So like Pinterest was actually started at Hacker Dojo, right?
Really?
So, yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Lambda School as well started at Hacker Dojo. So
okay,
yeah.
So give me 2 words about Hacker Dojo, just for anybody who doesn't know.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the facility is closed right now during coronavirus. But what it is, it's a nonprofit community center for people to go and improve their technical skills. So this is helping people who are just getting into tech for the first time, as well as helping people who already maybe have mastered some areas of technology to come and level up even more. Right. So you can sort of think of it like halfway between an incubator and like an anarchist community college.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So it's just it's run on a membership basis, but we when we're open, we have 10 times more people than members come through the front doors to go and take classes in machine learning, in Android programming, and whatever else it is. We've got all kinds of meetups. We've got a small machine shop there, so you can go and build some physical things, solder components, etc. Yeah.
I love it. And needless to say, you're the chairman of Hacker Dojo. But David, Medcorder. I see a lot of early stage startups right now, very lucky to be part of a great VC group in Silicon Valley. I'm not that often as invoked emotionally when I read even three short snippets about what a company does, and I know that it also has a personal story with you. What is Medcorder?
So Medcorder is a free application for Apple and for Android that helps patients record, transcribe, and discuss medical encounters with family members. So this was built after my dad got prostate cancer, and he was on the opposite coast from me, a couple thousand miles away. and we wanted to work together to figure out what was going on, what our options were, et cetera. So he would get permission from his oncologist to record the audio of the consults. He'd email that as an attachment to me. I'd listen through the whole thing. I'd write up a summary. I'd link out any medical terms or drugs I wasn't familiar with, and I'd email the family. The workflow worked great for getting us all on the same page about what was going on, but it was a lot of work on my part, and it became clear that most patients and their families didn't have a workflow like this. So I started looking into recordings. I found more than 40 years of clinical research showing that it's a great idea to send a patient home with a recording of the consult. They'll listen to it. Their family will listen to it. They'll have a much greater understanding of what the doctor said. They'll be able to retain a lot more. And without it, critically, patients forget 90% of what they're told by the next morning, which means that the actual consult, the time face to face with the doctor, is mostly wasted because you're saying things that the patient isn't able to retain. So I got really passionate about patients should have recording. We did this nationwide survey. We found that almost 70% of Americans really wish they could have had an audio recording of their last consult with a doctor. 4% actually walk away from that consult with a recording today. So it's
it's surprisingly high, I have to say. I'm surprised
that includes patients who are recording, by the way, right? So it's one of these things where it's not super niche. It turns out most patients want to better understand their doctors, and medically will do better if they actually understand their doctors. Recordings are a proven way of doing this. Sharing those recordings with families, a proven way of doing this. And it's not yet endemic. It's not yet something that is just part of the standard of practice in medical care. So I started designing Medcorder just to make it really easy for families to go and do this. While he was still working at Google, I released an early engineering prototype. And a few weeks after it hit the App Store, my Aunt Terry got diagnosed with multiple myeloma and started using the app, even in its very early crashy state, to coordinate her medical care, and found it transformative. And so I was like, oh man, if my aunt is finding this super helpful for her care in its current state, I need to take this seriously. So I quit my job at Google, went full time on Medcorder, founded a team, raised a seed round from Future Ventures, and built a first class native app for both iOS and for Android, as well as a web interface. And so we've got about 20,000 patients and family members across the United States. We're US only right now, that are using the app. We've got a partnership with UCSF's Patient Support Corps, and we actually have our first clinical trial that we kicked off 2 months ago called M-Encore to validate the use of Medcorder with prostate cancer patients. So the results of that should be out in Q2 of next year, where we'll be able to prove that giving patients Medcorder is a really good idea for a complex care condition. So I'm really passionate about the radical proposition that patients should understand their doctors, and Medcorder is the vehicle for that mission.
David, so when you mentioned that when you started off, you're just writing prototypes, your aunt was using the prototype. Were you writing the actual prototype?
No, I was. I'll be honest. I contracted out with a dev shop, full stack dev shop, to go and do it. We wrote the front end in Flutter and did the back end in Firebase. I was just providing product direction, right?
So
yeah.
I mainly love the idea that you obviously you have all the capabilities you need in order to build these things yourself, but you're leveraging your passion and intuition to help get these ideas across, even using other skills. I mean, and we have, it's a worldwide economy right now, and we have people all over the world that can do it. You're both supporting them. You're getting this idea across, and now you validated it. You're going to help, potentially millions of people, and it's almost as if their life depends on it, right? I mean, literally.
Yeah.
So I'm deeply inspired by this.
Oh, cool. Yeah, the full stack developer who we ended up finding through that firm, who's been full time on Medcorder and the like for 2.5 years now. We actually just this last month brought on board to our team as a full time teammate. He's based in Minsk in Belarus. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just wonderful, David. 20 minutes go by way too quickly. I really want to thank you for the inspiration, both now and for the time you gave 7 years ago at Hacking Generation Y. I just love talking to you. I love your energy, and I resonate so well with your trajectory and your optimization for learning. I'm a curious, passionate person myself, and this is I'm very direct and honest. This is like a role model for me right now. Just listening to this and seeing your journey, really wonderful. Before we end, I have to ask for 3 words that you would use to describe yourself, or that anybody who knows you would describe you.
I start things.
I start things. David, thank you so much. Just phenomenal. Thank you very, very much. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Take care.